Biffy James, thank you so much for speaking with Love Oswaya today about your debut novel, Completely Normal and Other Lies, which is soon to be released at the beginning of July.
Thank you, Alice. Oh my God, it's so fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So my first question is that Completely Normal, obviously there's a death that's quite central to the plot, but it's also within the world of a high school, and it's very much interrogates the experience of belonging. And in many ways, the death is used to kind of bring to the shadow questions of friendship groups that aren't great and confronting experiences when you're a teenager. I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of the death as a device, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The death as kind of a device came into the book through two completely separate things, or inspired by two separate things. The first one being is I actually had a very close person to me die very suddenly, about 8 years ago now. And
so sorry.
Thank you. But it was interesting because after that event, I kind of discovered about how death and grief is at the same time the most generous and selfish thing. As in, like, how people come together and rally around each other and stuff is just kind of beautiful. But at the same time, I think people, because there are no rules for death, I remember in my experience starting asking myself like these really bizarre questions, like stuff like, oh, were we as good friends as I thought we were? Like, maybe, all of these weird things that really kind of threw me at the time, going, why am I even thinking this? Why am I thinking like, oh my God, how important was I really? Like, what the fuck, basically. So know what this is about. But and I kept on thinking, oh God, I'm doing this wrong. I'm having like this really weird reaction. And I remember, at the wake as well, like I'd cried all of my makeup off and I was really worried, thinking, oh my God, I look awful. I kept saying to me, no one's going to care. And but I cared. And that's when I started thinking, oh, there's all these rules or no rules, but it's really hard. Like, people don't have practice with that, especially at that age as a teenager, or they shouldn't have practice with it. So that was one thing. And the other thing that kind of was a thing is that exploring this idea is when there comes to death, and especially young death, it only ever happens to the most beloved of people. As in, you never hear about like, a teenager suddenly died and, and everyone was speaking to the reporters out that side of school saying, yeah, he was a real dickhead. Like, they're always, once someone dies, they become just this shining example of humanity. And I particularly think that's when someone is young. And I wanted to explore that a little bit. And with someone who is making some maybe questionable choices and then kind of gets away with it, or never has to explain himself or something like that, Lastly, I really wanted it to be more like this kind of dual love story, one between Stella and Isaac and the other between Stella and Grace. And I couldn't have it without Stella and Grace without getting rid of Isaac. So it was basically just a plot device. Sorry, that sounds really irreverent, doesn't it?
No,
I just told him off.
The book is actually like it punches you in certain ways, but there is that humor through it. So I think you walk the balance really well. But I know exactly what you mean.
And when I just tell people, oh, so what's your book about? I'm like, oh, it's about this like, girl who falls in love with a guy with a girlfriend, and like, plot twist, he dies, like, and it's the ultimate ghosting. So that's what I call it. I'm just like, and that was kind of the other thing. It's just like, what happens, like, dying is the ultimate ghosting. You're never going to get the answers that you want. You're never going to be like have closure or explanations. And I think I explore that quite a bit, is just like, and ghosting is so prevalent in today's society. with dating and boys and like, oh, I really liked him and then he just never wrote back. Maybe he died. It's like, no, maybe he died. And the other thing I say to people is like, what's it about? I'm like, oh, it's about death, but like funny.
Yeah, it's I think what was really interesting is because it's from Stella's perspective, even though you are sitting there and you're like, okay, I know that how Isaac is behaving is not okay. You buy in, right? You buy into his charm and the dynamic between the two of them. And like as I was going through, I was like, oh, I'm not looking forward to the point where he's no longer here. And then after it happened, and then as things move forward, I was like, yeah, he didn't behave particularly well in this regard. And yeah, like that wasn't okay. And, I bought in the way that she bought in, which is, a mark of really good writing and a really compelling narrative and a compelling internal voice. I've been in my teenage years, there were those instances where, you would have what you felt was a really good connection, a really lovely connection with someone, and they wouldn't commit and they wouldn't sort of, I guess, take it public. It happened to me when I was a teen. I feel like everyone, it's happened to at some point.
Wow, yeah.
But there was a couple of moments when I was like, oh my God, she's writing my life. Like she's writing this moment in my teenage years that was so not just devastating, and not devastating, but it's so consuming because you don't have a clear answer and you don't know why or what's holding them back. And you're trying to go, well, what's wrong with this? Is it me or is it you? But what's wrong with you? Like, so yeah, you wrote that so well. And it was so engaging. It's so cathartic to read as well.
Thank you. Like a friend of mine read it, and I think what my favorite thing that she said was afterwards, she's like, I finished the book and I still don't know whether Isaac's a good guy or not. Yeah. And I'm like, yes. And that's the thing. Like, he probably would have grown up to be a really decent dude.
What I was really interested in was also that Stella's father has recently not just taken a new partner, but moved to a different country. And her mother is, and this is all in the first chapter, so I'm not giving those spoilers, and her mother is not necessarily communicating with her in a way that she can hear. And I think I was really interested because I had a very strong reaction to Sel's mother and to her father. As the story progressed, I think you really humanized them and you didn't necessarily excuse their behavior. And you didn't sort of do that thing of, oh, well, parents are human too. And parents, you realize that parents make mistakes. It was almost that moment of, Stella needed some time by herself before she was ready to talk to her parents and let her parents parent her.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in that. And I'm really interested in, one, I guess, how you did that, but why or how you did that and how you arrived at the decision to do that.
Mostly, I sent her dad away because I just couldn't be bothered dealing with you. For a start, just like, oh yeah, he can just be off somewhere, maybe the divorce or something, I don't care. And then later on, I'm like, oh, I guess I could do this whole weaving thing about trust and relationships and stuff. But for the start, it was just like, oh God, I can't be bothered dealing with like a 2-parent happy family. Stella's mother was also originally a bit more detached in nature and like her dad, just like kind of forgetting about Stella and that, just because I'm just like, I didn't find them particularly interesting. And I think, but I knew I wanted to write the scene, one of the first scenes that I wrote then was when her parent is doing that parenting book thing. Okay, a peer has just died. I'm going to parent. So they both kind of spawned from that scene. It's like, all right, no, we're going to sit at the table, we're going to have a discussion, and I'm going to parent the school as, I'm going to be having this great mum moment. And where that comes from, I'm not quite sure, because like I literally come from the Brady Bunch. Like my parents are just like best mates and like in love, and I'm staying at their house right now in school holidays because they're legends, Yeah, so I really wish I could have this like really beautiful meaning answer, and I don't. I think they just kind of grew out of necessity.
No, that is a great answer. I mean, especially if you're a planner like me. Like I sit down and I plan out the themes.
Good. I wish I could do that. I don't. This was my plan. I can tell you the exact thing in my head. This is the most plot I've ever had in my head. Is I was going for a walk. It was during lockdown, and I went, "What happens if a girl meets a dude, she falls in love, and then he dies, and then but no one knew about her existence, and what's she going to do with all of those feelings?" And I always knew that there was a girlfriend, and originally my idea was just like Stella would turn into kind of this like creepy stalker, like she does a little bit, but like really integrates herself into Grace's life. And so the very first scene that I thought of that I wanted it to get to was her having dinner at Grace's house with the parents, and the parents being a bit gross, or the mum being a bit gross, and Stella standing up for it. So everything was just like going towards that scene, because that was the only one that I had kind of planned in my head.
No, that makes sense. Like that works really well, like, because you know what you're writing to. And that was a beautiful moment, by the way. Like that was, I think, like, because again, like I think everyone or a lot of people know or have witnessed that kind of like those comments, and it's and I don't want to say it's always, but unfortunately it is often from a mother figure to the daughter about what they're reading and their figure. And so it rang really true. And it was also such a, like, Stella at times, I never disliked her. You know, I never had to work to like Stella. But there were times when I was like, oh, okay, you need to, like, you know, take some control, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. And so when she does stand up and when she does really come out swinging, it's a beautiful moment. Like it's really, and you know, the fallout, or the, you know, the way that the action almost like falls from that, it's delightful. So like makes total sense.
Thank you.
Final question. So you wrote an article, I think a couple of years ago, about I didn't get a perfect ATAR and the journey of my life. It was in, I think, published in The Guardian. It's a great article, by the way.
Thank you.
It was a couple of years ago, I think, because you then said you were a dorm mother and then you worked on film. Can you kind of speak a little bit to that and then link it to this?
So every year around November, you open the newspaper and it's always about, you know, smiling kids going, I got 99.9 zillion affinity, and now I'm going to do like arts, law, med, and it's like, that's great. Really awesome for you. Go, you little rock star. But I just don't think those are the interesting stories. I want to hear from the people who got like, hey, I failed year 12 and then I went into a trade and now I own my own business and I'm raking, you know, 7 figures a year. Great. That's, I find, a little more inspiring than someone who is academically gifted, who can work the school system. It was just because it was all the same. And I was thinking, okay, and it was like that the articles that come out at the end of the year when people get their, you know, perfect scores. I just want to hear the different story. I want to hear from the students who didn't get 99 point zillion, and those are the stories that we don't often hear. So I guess now bringing it back to the book, and it's like, okay, I want to hear from the girl who actually doesn't get the boy. Does that make her less than? Does that make her heartbroken? I want to like hear from the girls who didn't, like, you know, fall out and were never friends again. And, you know, I want to hear about the girl who might be seen as, you know, plus size from others. That doesn't stop her being the hottest girl in school. That was, you know, those kind of things. It's just like, it's not mutually exclusive.
In Completely Normal, what you did really well, and to link it back into your story of I didn't get a great mark and I still had a great life. Something we've been reflecting on just recently at Love Osway is the importance of having narratives that resonate with you, that reflect you back to yourself and affirm you and your experience. And I think you did that in the narrative of, you know, not everything is about that perfect data, but also about, you know, you can be a plus size person, or you should be a plus size person and be like, damn, I'm really attractive. Or a jock who is in a position of perhaps wanting a little bit more complexity. I think you did that really beautifully, Biffy. So yeah, no, it's a great read. Congratulations on the launch, and we're very excited to see what comes next.
Thank you so much, Alice. This has been really, really fun. It's made me feel like super important.